It's Friday, and welcome back to the wrap up. I'm joined by Agatha and see. I'm gonna do this. I'm joined by Agatha and Steve, my co-hosts, and we have a truly international cast this week. One of the things that we really don't do enough on Asians Represent is talk about, Asian designers and Asian community members, Asian community organizers, all over the world. One of the things that, Agatha and I initially really featured was mostly just Canadian, Asian creators who are working in tabletop games, mostly because we could invite them to my condos and we could record. And we weren't ever considering we did one. Actually, no, we did one virtual recording and it didn't go too well. Not because the guest was bad, but because of the quality of their internet. And it's one that I would like to do again. There is a teacher named Khairul Hisham. He's an artist. He was on episode 3 of the Asians Represent podcast, and we were talking about TTRPGs and education, and the quality of his internet connection made it really difficult to hear. And so we were like, okay, we're never doing remote again. And then I think we did it a couple more times. But now that we're going fully remote, I think we have a responsibility to include more voices from around the world. And so when Sam, you and I started talking, because we talked, we've talked on and off on Twitter, but when you and I talked seriously, it was for Metatopia because I was your mentor. And we started talking about marketing ourselves, creating our own brands online. And then you DM'd me and you were like, yo, I got this thing that I'm doing. We're going to talk about during this stream, but I got this thing. Can we do an Asians Represent thing? Can Asians Represent help? And I was like, hells yeah. And then Rachel asked Steve and I about, how can Asians Represent help with session 0? There were some things that we couldn't end up doing, but the least we could do is just blast session 0 con out there into the internet as much as we can, and that's what this is for. So that's what this topic is about. That's what this episode is about. It's about our duty as community organizers, our duties as I would say, I don't want to say guardians or stewards, but not even representatives, because we are not representative. If you look at all 6 of us, we are not even representative of what it is to be Asian. But this episode is a start on that conversation. So now, before we start, we're doing something a little bit different for this episode. If you're watching on YouTube, I mean, the sentiment is still the same. Steve is going to take over primary hosting if I seem a little off today. An old student of mine who I taught for 4 years passed away 2 days ago. And this afternoon was a bit rough, but, I committed to doing this. I committed to doing this stream, and I think it's a really important topic. And so I'm here for that. I'm going to dig through this Facebook chat that Agatha, Steve, and I have in search of these messages. Well, Steve, you take over.
I'd love to. Before I do, Daniel, it is your right and your honor to tell us, what day is it?
Oh, I already said. I said it's Friday. That's the first thing I said.
Okay, clearly not paying attention. Damn, so many dunks on me today. But we're going to blow past it because I want to introduce our guests. So I'm going to go around here. I'm going to go Pam, Rachel, Sam, if that's okay. Just like any other time when we have introductions, feel free to introduce yourself in as many or as few words as you feel comfortable. We do have your Twitter handles down there as well. But if you could introduce who you are and your pronouns, that'd be amazing. So Pam, let's start with you.
Hello, I'm the usual Discord Asians Represent person, trying to pop in more often. So I'm Pam Punzalan, also known as the Dovetailer. So you can find me on Twitter, Itch, and on Patreon there. I'm currently based in Manila. I may actually see a lot of you, pandemic willing and life willing, maybe around 2022 or late this year, because my brain is still in 2020. So I was like, next year, no, this year. So yeah, I do a lot of community stuff, but something that might come up in this discussion later is the fact that I'm actually very uncomfortable with saying community stuff, especially when it comes to representation, all those air quotes everywhere. Anyway, you can find a lot of my stuff everywhere, and I will have some major projects coming out hopefully this year. So that's me.
Awesome. So happy to have you back here. Happy to be part of the Asian Represent community as well. I know you hate the word, so I'm going to say it. But moving on, Rachel, who are you?
So I'm Rachel Tang from the Philippines. I do event organizing for tabletop RPGs in Manila for the group Gamers and Gaming Meets. So I don't do like game design or anything. Like I'm not prolific like Pam or stuff like that, right? I just play a lot, but I do events organizing. So that's I guess generally what I'm known for in the local community. So other than that, I actually just lurk around on social media, discords and everything. So that's all of it.
Amazing. And Rachel, you're also one of our amazing mods in the Asian Represent Discord. That Discord link invite, we sell a couple more spaces. We only bring in members if we have enough moderators to help make sure that everything stays kind of to the standard that we want our community to interact with. If you stick around, I will be dropping that Discord invite in the chat. But thanks so much, Rachel. And lastly, Sam. Sam, who are you?
Hi, I'm Sam. I make games about, I used to say trauma, but like I've grown out of trauma, so I just say violence and Asianness, amongst other things. I'm not a community leader. I don't like community stuff. I hate it. It's very stressful, so I just stick to, non-stressful things like game design. I am part of the Our Shore #OurShores podcast. Not podcast, Kickstarter, Blair. Kickstarter with Pam, Sin, and I think Gio and Joaquin. We'll probably link to that, which is a RPG SAA compilation. Before this, we will not have been able to. We will not been able to have Kickstarter if not for Sandy Park Games. So that's great. This is like the first time I think any of us have done crowdfunding before. I'm doing Capitalites. I'll let like Pam talk about her game later on, but yeah, I'm doing Capitalites, a game which I feel represents my opinion, my feelings on Asian representation, namely like a totally fantastical portrayal, and I'm going for more of like a hard ass realistic autobiographical how do I put it? Okay, basically, I think the better words would be Capitalize just takes my real life and the people I know in real life and just puts them into a game, So in the game, you play stuff like career women, you play stuff like players, you play stuff like religious hypocrites, people dress up in hype beast wear, streetwear, just walk around the Kuala Lumpur, or it could be Singapore, Manila, that sort of thing. So real life Asian people living in the city. Yeah, that's the game.
I love that. I love that there's more of these games, in my opinion, more games like this coming out where it's less like Dungeons and Dragons. It's more like slice of life, just be an identity and just like exist. And I think that is so fulfilling and so wonderful and so beautiful. So I love just hearing about these kind of games and all the different possibilities out there. I think I talked. Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, it's like how like Terrace House is become popular because people want real shit. People want to see real people.
Yeah, you can make. Go ahead, Rachel.
Sorry, that's a good way to sell it actually, right? Terrace House.
I made a Terrace House RPG actually.
Oh.
Yeah. It's called Room X Mates. I published it on my Patreon, and it's only available there. It's a one-page RPG based inspired by Terrace House. Sorry, somebody's messaging me. I'm distracted. But anyways, look, because Steve was in our Zoom chat, is like, I forgot the questions. But here, one of the things that like I'm happy about and happy to hear is that like y'all are working on games that are not in like the mainstream. You're not doing like a D&D thing. You're not doing like a Pathfinder thing. You're doing your own thing. You're creating your own systems. You're hacking other systems to tell your own stories. And I think that's just super important. Now, I have one announcement as well. If you follow me on Twitter, or if you are on the internet, you probably already know I'm on a D&D book called Candlekeep Mysteries, and it comes out in March. Super excited for that one because I know that there are a lot of people who are like, "Hey, no D&D," and I promise that this rant is going to actually relate to this episode. But there are a lot of people who are like, "No D&D, we can't have D&D. It's not a game about or for us." And while one route is to just completely abandon D&D and create things that, tell slice of life stories like Sam you were talking about, or create games of like hyper violence, or create like cyberpunk games like Jammy talked about. I think another thing that's very important is to make sure that we are still present in the D&D space, because if we completely abandon it, then it truly becomes a space that is not for us. So I'm super excited to be a part of that book. Super excited to have written an adventure, and super excited that they said, "Hey, we want an adventure. It has to be a mystery, and otherwise you could write whatever you want." And I said, "Can I write 80s Hong Kong action cinema?" And they said yes. And so I'm super excited. That's the only clue I'll drop until people buy the book. But yeah, I'm super excited that that's out. I'm super excited that we've been able to put out some Asian D&D content, and I'm sure we'll do an episode of the podcast and just talk about working for Wizards of the Coast and the adventure. But that said, I would just really love to just talk about one thing that I'm sure we've all seen online. It's that hashtag RPGSEA. Like, I've talked about it before. Like, I think we've talked about it on the podcast. But one of the things I really want to talk about is like the origin of that. There's no other community out there in the TTRPG space that has a hashtag for them, right? There's no like hashtag RPG China that I know of. But RPG SEA is so big in the North American scene, which I think is so cool and so awesome. Like, where did that come from?
So, caveat, I'm not the founder of the hashtag. I'm just the really, really loud girl on the side going like, follow my friends and follow these projects. And even if we're not friends, follow them because they're from the region. That's me. The founders of the hashtag are actually DJ Ratio from the Philippines, and Xiao Han from Singapore. And we did have some friends in Malaysia also who helped out with the hashtag before. So I think how it exploded, I guess, and for some people in North America was when Mahar and I went to Big Bad Con last year. We pledged that because certain people in our TTRPG spaces were kind enough to believe in us and literally show their belief by giving us money, we would give back. We would not be gates, barring other people from designing and from playing and from creating. We would be the open door to showing our experiences. So since we pledged that, with Rachel's help and with the rest of G&G behind us, and we can talk about that later, we basically printed out a fuck ton of games, and I stuffed it in my suitcase like some kind of dealer, and I went to Big Bad Con. So I think anybody who went to the con last year may remember the girl in makeup, look kind of goth, going like, "Hey, can I talk to you about my games? Yes, these are my friends. Yes, me." And then mostly them don't pay attention to me. That was me, like the entirety of last year. And Mahar and I also went on a panel to talk all about what RPGC means. But we were very careful to say one thing, which is anybody who follows me will notice that I always go back to this, right? The idea of the center versus like the fringe, right? So when we did the talk, the first thing we told people was RPGC is not actually a community. It is simply a hashtag, and you file other people under it. Now, within RPGC, because it is a hashtag, you will have both individuals and you will have communities. So, like, again, if you track how I used to talk about it, I used to say community, but these days I go like the hashtag or like communities, because another private thing that came up with the discourse of people who follow the hashtag is none of us want to speak for ourselves, for better or for worse. We just want to show our projects. And that is something inherently important. Many people have many ideas of what representation is, but the first rule of thumb is that you have to let them speak for themselves. Now, whether you like what they say or not, that's not important at the moment. What's important is that you gave them the mic. So last year's exercise in Big Bad Con was us trying to give the mic, and that's what many people in RPGC try to do. So I expressed my reservations in Metatopia to a couple of people. I don't know whether it was caught live. I forgot, because they were, a lot of the Metatopia people were also saying, "Yeah, you're Pam from RPGC, right? You're like the community leader." And I'm like, I'm not the community leader. I run like one Discord that says that it's an RPGC Discord, but that does not make me a leader. I'm a particularly loud voice at the moment through the blessings of the fact that a lot of people again believed in me and are hiring me, and I'm becoming increasingly visible. But that does not make me a leader. That only makes me somebody who wants to uplift more voices, and I can lead in other communities, but RPGC is not one. So I'm just there. And to your point about spaces having a hashtag, RPG South America. South America recently did that, so it's RPG Latam, so RPG Latin America. They were inspired apparently by us, which is kind of cool. So I think Diogo and a couple of others were saying, if RPGC can do it, then why can't we? So that was when they started filing their own stuff under Twitter. So they're also quite vibrant and very different. So I think that's RPGC in a nutshell. We hesitate to make a lot of grand declarations about it. But what I've noticed is that, and I guess Sam and others can weigh in if they want, we need to be allowed to say what we want to say and create what we want to create. And we hope that the more majority spaces of RPGs will understand that, whether they are players or exclusive GMs, I guess, or creators or industry people. It is important for us to be heard on our terms and not spoken for. So I think that's what I've got so far.
Yeah, I have. See, you said last year. This was actually 2 years ago.
Yeah.
Was it 2 years ago? See, my brain is time is weird.
This is 2 years
I'm
ago.
done.
I remember when we first met and we went
Yeah.
to this like sandwich shop.
Yeah.
We walked really far. And we went to this sandwich shop, and yeah, it was such a great event because I remember. I have two very fond memories. I remember us spending the majority of our time at the in the lobby of the convention,
Yeah.
just chilling, and I remember you folks had a table and you had all of your games out that you bought that you brought, and everybody was like, have you met the creators of Southeast Asia? They've got just like this amazing stuff. And I remember looking at all this stuff and I'd be like, I've never seen anything like this. And just so happy that other people are finally getting to see it as well. And I think in the past couple of years, a lot of folks from Southeast Asia have been working pretty intensely in the North American TTRPG industry, which I think is so cool because one thing we are in desperate need of, and I say we as in this industry, is in desperate need of, are new ideas and new perspectives. We've been talking in the Discord about that Rising Sun Kickstarter, how terrible it is. And it's just a very clear example of the fact that people just don't know what's good, or people just aren't exposed to new ideas. People aren't exposed to games created by actual Asian people, and they have grown up, and it is in many ways not their fault, but they've grown up playing games about Asian people by white people. And it's a problem. And I feel like, going and searching RPG SEA, even though it is not a community, is a great way of finding creators, finding voices, and I think very importantly, finding conversation. I think is so important. Like when we talk on the Discord, even in our mods chat or our admin chat, where we're talking, like some of you folks have like takes that are completely different from the rest of us. And it's so important that you voice that and have a space where you can voice that. Because otherwise we don't learn your perspectives. And even us as Asian people, we also maybe accidentally or inadvertently drown out your perspective. So I think having that hashtag is a great way of just finding people, even though it isn't like a unified organization. Having that hashtag is a great way of finding discussion. So I'm grateful that exists. So I kind of want to move into first by talking about session 0. This is a big thing because it's also happening very soon. Okay, we've been talking about how we met at Big Bad Con, how we had this LobbyCon, and I was just talking to a mutual friend of a lot of the Toronto TTRPG. I was just talking to our friend Rob Diabald, who's an amazing person, right? I was just talking to Rob, and Rob and I were basically saying you know what, I miss people. I miss being around people, but I also miss conventions because for many of us, conventions are one of the main avenues for us to catch up with people and interact. And I came to this realization when I was talking to Rob that I haven't been to a convention in over a year. And I miss it so deeply. And so with Rachel, you were like, Daniel, Steve, we're doing this thing. Can we show you what we're doing? And you kind of you showed me the demo of session 0. And I don't want to say what it is because I want you to explain it because this is your thing. I was blown away because I remember talking to Steve and being like, "Oh, Steve, this is the future. This is if we ever do Representicon again, it's got to be done this way. Just because it's what you're doing with session 0 is so cool, and it's a great way of introducing people to new perspectives, but also bringing back that convention feel, which I know so many people miss. So Rachel, do you want to start by just talking about what session 0 is and what you folks plan on doing with it?
Sure. So session 0 is initially the idea for session 0 was to promote indie RPG designers in the Philippines to Filipinos, because prior to the pandemic we were doing physical events, right? So it was all just Manila, and then we sometimes we did have some people come in from outside Manila, but normally that's quite a big restriction, right? Traveling. But Manila is a dense city, and a lot of the hobby in the country is there. Not all of it, but a big chunk is there. So we said, let's do this. I think if we can get 20 designers to show their stuff, that's already a big event for us. Because we're a very tiny group, and venue constraints and everything, a normal event for us would be about 60 people, right? And then, so we had it in 2019. It was the first one, and it was surprisingly very well received. I a lot of the designers have given me feedback that it has given them, I guess, that push. That design that you keep to your heart for 6 years because it's never perfect enough. So a lot of them decided, what, this event is happening. Let's show it. It's time to bring it out. And that's what a lot of them did. They debuted their games there and everything. So we were really looking forward to the 2020 version because we had all of these plans to get money and everything to fly in people from RPGC, the other designers in RPGC. And then, pandemic happened and everything. So we were thinking, do we do it online? And I didn't feel like doing it on Discord would give justice to the whole idea of a trade show of products by these creators. So I sat on it for a while, and then one of our fellow organizers said, my friend does art for Gather Down, and I like that tool. Do you want to look at it? And back then, Gather really looked like it looked very different from what it looks like now. So I thought about it for a month. I wasn't really convinced. And then I tried it again, and I'm like, yeah, let's do this. And then we thought, if we're going to go online, should we keep it local? Or can we now do our vision of doing an RPGC event? Right? Can we invite others? And then it became, should we stop at RPGC? Can we invite other Asians or Asian diaspora? Like, can we invite Daniel? Can we invite Asians Represents? And then we're all like, yeah, why not? So that's why now we have 100 exhibitors, right? So it's a lot bigger than what we anticipate we would be doing for the second round, but at the same time, because it's digital, there are no limits except for server space and everything. So we said, yeah, let's do this. So that's the session 0 that we're expecting at the end of the month. So that's everything you've seen so far, and but that was really I suppose you can say that was really the one thing that we really looked for. Like, how do we simulate a physical convention? Like, how do we make people interact and connect, like, with that convention feel, like the atmosphere? So we didn't really settle for the other tools that we found because they didn't give us that satisfaction. But this one, you get a map, you get a sprite, you walk around the map, and when you bump into people, you end up in a call with them, like this one, like a conference call. You walk away and then you can't hear them anymore because, in real life, that's also what happens, right? And then you can see other people in the distance. You know that they're talking to each other. So you can just feel in yourself, I want to join them. So you'll walk over to them and then you can join their discussion. So that's the whole, that's the basic of the map.
Yeah.
But then we'll have item interactions and everything. Now, you were there for the demo. So
Yeah,
how did you feel about that?
I thought it was so cool because, okay, so one of the things that happened was, like, I came into the world, and immediately, like, one of you met me, and I was talking to you. And as we were moving, I kind of did the Daniel thing, and I wandered away to explore. And I wandered away to explore, and then I couldn't hear anybody. And I was like, what's happening? And then one of you actually came back and moved your sprite next to mine. And then all of a sudden I could hear you. Yeah. And I was like, what is going on? And I had never used gather.town before. And the fact that you can actually set your own personal bubble. So you can make it so that you could hear people 2 sprites from you. Or you could only hear people who are, like, perpendicular to you. Like, it is so cool because it actually, in many ways, simulates that convention feel, but gives you far more precise control over boundaries. Like, this is a con where you're going to have moderators. So there will be people who are moderating this online con. There are going to be people who would love to just talk to everybody and can set their social distance to much wider. There are going to be people who are going to want to have, more low-key conversations and can find a space. Like, in the demo you showed me, you had, like, there was the literal lobby. And I was like, it's just like the hotel lobby. You had the literal lobby. You had, like, rooms that you could play games in. You had a place for panels. And what's super cool is that you had an actual space for vendors.
Yeah.
You had an actual space for vendors where you can go and you could interact with people's web stores.
Yeah.
And what you've built is just so incredible. And, we've seen those cons. We've seen, like, we've seen that the Gen Con onlines. We've seen the D&D celebrations. We've seen... have we seen other cons online? I mean, there have been, like, Comic Cons, and Fan Expo Toronto went online as well. But online cons have always been about, just, like, broadcasting panels, and never about that community gathering. And Session 0 Con does that, and it's just so cool and so special. And, like, Agatha, I don't think you've actually seen the Session 0 thing, but, like, what are your thoughts on this? Like, having a virtual con space that you can customize your sprite too. And
this actually reminds me. Oh, I don't remember what it's called anymore, but there was that. Actually, never mind. It reminds me of when I was a kid, and there was a thing that was really popular that all of my classmates played called Hobo Hotel, but that's not. But this is, like, the way better version of it, and it's so sci-fi. We're living in the future. This is. I'm sad that I missed out on it, but I guess I won't be because the actual con is still coming up.
Yeah, I go, Steve.
Honestly, for me, like the con experience, like I do panels and things like that, but my con experience is like it's gravity. I feel I want to feel weight, and this gives me tools to actually have people gather around. They like make their own little like bundles. They come together like matter to like be this star, and it's bright and it's shining, and like there's a lot of value in that. And then at some point in time, they just break away, and then it novas, and then everyone else goes off and they do other things. They gather somewhere else, and it's like that sinusoidal like flow through conventions that I'm super into. So this technology, this setup, plus the moderation, in a lot of ways, it's kind of better than a normal con space. I don't think I'd ever give up a physical con because I like my hugs.
I like hugs. I was about to say, like, I miss hugs.
I like my hugs. I like working with people. I like giving people piggyback rides. We're gonna go on top of those stairs as fast as we possibly can. I like feats of strength, even though that is a health and safety problem. I just love. I once pulled my shoulder, seeing if I could clean and jerk a friend over my head. I told you this story.
I think that the one con story you've talked about the most probably on the server, Steve, is how you lost a push-up competition.
I lost a push-up competition,
but the person
I was
cheated.
So upset.
But the person cheated.
100% they cheated. 100% they cheated. I did it strict, and I lost.
Dressed as Lee Sin.
Pissed about that. I was just a Muay Thai Lee Sin because I had one day to make a costume, and I looked at League of Legends, and I'm like, which of these costumes can I make out of stuff in my closet today? Anyways, I got sidetracked here. I just wanted to gush because I love this whole concept, everything about Session Zero.
Like, I think all of my fondest memories come from not actually engaging in the con programming, and it's always the social parts. Like, I had Big Bad Con is still one of my favorite cons, and like I have such fond memories of like eating too many fortune cookies and falling asleep, or like writing a fortune.
Wait, you fell asleep?
Yeah.
Is this one of your skills, like catching a fly in midair? You eat a fortune cookie and fall asleep in the middle?
I can sleep anywhere. That is a skill of mine. I can't sleep anywhere. No, Yoma, who did the art for the Critical Role Blood Hunter. He's an artist. Lemmy, Lucky Ann Dice, and Ed Chuck from Dreaming of Light on Twitter. We went to there's this really famous Golden Gate fortune cookie factory in San Francisco, and I bought a whole bunch of like handmade fortune cookies, and I ate them in the car, and I passed out. But then we wrote a game in the lobby about eating fortune cookies. Yeah, Emma in the chat has called out that I have fallen asleep standing up on a moving subway train. It's
honestly, like a good quarter of your stories end with you falling asleep somewhere in public, and like I'm here for that.
Yeah, I'm
here for like that. That's a good flex. I like that.
That is a very good flex.
Falling asleep in public.
Absolutely, yeah. Like how could you
fall asleep anywhere? Just living that life.
Like there's being vulnerable, and there's like I'm gonna lose consciousness within your space. Like that's like ultimate vulnerability. Like kudos to you.
Oh yeah.
Is that what that means? Is that what vulnerability means?
I think that's what vulnerability means. It's like, yeah, I could be robbed right now, but you know what? I feel safe. Like traveling, oof. Catch me at an airport. That's me. Me.
Steve, you took us on a journey with that. I was not expecting that to be the direction.
Here's the thing, like these
I'm glad we're here.
Here's the thing, these like to bring it back in, these conversations that we're having, these moments can kind of happen at a con like Session Zero. Like I really love how one of the things you've emphasized is not only like programming, but also just like gathering and having conversations in a safe but moderated way. And I don't say moderated like a Discord server. It's just so fantastic, and I'm just so grateful that you reached out to Steve and I to ask us about it, because I think what you're doing is fantastic. So I kind of want to move into our Shores, and I kind of want to move into like creation and getting your voice out there, because community is one thing. Having a community is so fantastic. But what's also great is having a community that like uplifts each other's work. So like I'm gonna take it to Sam, because Sam, like you and I met. Like obviously we know each other from Twitter, but you and I got to meet and chat through the Metatopia mentorship program. and we just vibed. And so like I would love for you to introduce like Our Shores, like what's it all about broadly, and then of course like I want to hear Pam, like what are you doing with Our Shores, what's going on with that project, and we'll just see where it goes from there.
I'm just gonna say, if you want to say in broad terms, it's the first chance for SEA creators to be able to have a Kickstarter, have crowdfunding, you know, on this scale, unlike the scale of our North American Asian counterparts. It's not just we are having 3 projects. So we have got Capitalites, we've got Nevertham's End by Hamu and Sin, and we have Mahalika, which I love. It's a spiritual mecha game by Licker Kennedy, aka Joaquin Sabadera, if I'm pronouncing it right, and Gio Manning, who does the art. Go check out the art. Go fucking check out the art. Yeah.
Actually,
Where
I want to
can,
say
where can
one
people
thing
find
about-
that art?
I can link it in a bit. I
Sick.
do want to say one thing before Sam goes on. Maharlika was actually one of the games that I brought. Before Karandoon happened, Maharlika was Joaquin's first project. And fantastically, it was written fully in Tagalog. So some of our diasporic friends bought up, I think, 3 of the 4 copies that I brought, because they were asking me, is this a good game for me to learn Tagalog? And I said, hell yeah, if you want to break your brain, yes it is, because it's a full Filipino, that's not Filipino, that's actually centering. It's written fully in Tagalog with mechanics and lore and terms and everything. So if you want to have a trial by fire and practice your Tagalog, this is how you do it. So
damn.
Maharlika was there. It was Joaquin's first project. Karandoon happened after, and I think that's the one that Joaquin's more known for. So Sam can go on. I'll just add stuff later.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, we're also getting, I think, about 9 other RPG SEA creators. Kai from Echo is one of
Yeah,
them.
Kai.
Yeah. Who else? We have I think Shao and Alena from Singapore.
Yeah.
If I'm not wrong, Bianca from the Philippines. We also have a lot of unknowns, the relative unknowns that are going to be on the Kickstarter. I mean, so like I probably mentioned their names, but you'll probably be like, who are they? That's the great part about this Kickstarter. It's an excuse for us to be like, hey, here's this obscure person with 10 followers, you know. Let's give them a game. Let's give them like production. So we have, I think, I don't know their real name, but they go by Varuna. Let's see. Yes,
I'm not familiar either. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I don't.
Even we're not familiar with the people
Yeah.
that we're putting together.
Yeah.
Sam was super helpful with putting together the zine stuff, because I was like, hey dude, I can only cover like this side. Please take care of Malaysia. And that was like putting the Kickstarter together with Sam and Sin and Joaquin was also an exercise in RPGC. Like none of us knew anything. We were just like, okay, you handle your side, I'll handle mine. Let's get together. Let's talk about it. And then let's see how everybody is. Because like another important thing that everyone needs to remember about Our Shores is it's major projects. This time we're not just stretch goals, and it's not just like one micro game. It's Capitalese is huge, Nevatham's End is huge, and so is Maharlika. So we're talking like 650-page upwards projects of Southeast Asia. Now, my personal note about that, I don't know whether Sam feels the same way, and that's okay. But like for me, everybody kind of thinks that Southeast Asian creators from the region only do indie and only do small stuff. They don't realize that we have been hacking your white games forever. Most of, like, if you wanted to hire us to write monsters for D&D or hacks for Pathfinder or entire scenarios for World of Darkness or even in an alternative L5R, we could do that because that's the design space that we grew up in. In some ways, we actually know it a lot better than some other creators that that do not come from the region. So us doing indie is it's a deceptive veil, really, because for us, we just want to make sure that people create what they want, and that's the important thing. So when I think Sam and I had a lot of conversations, if I remember correctly, where we were like, okay, let's just do the thing. Yeah, well, whatever, let's go for it. So that's the spirit of our Shores.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, like you had mentioned BJ earlier when I asked about the RPG SEA, and like when we had BJ on for like Asians Read Oriental Adventures. Remember that, Steve? It was just like
One of my favorite episodes.
Yeah,
One of my
I was
favorite
like,
episodes.
what? Like, people are really missing out, and you're right. Like, I think people could like, it's almost like Indie is synonymous with RPG SEA, which is like not the case. And
It's also important. Oh, sorry, Daniel,
No, go
I
ahead.
interrupted you. It's also important. This is gonna get a little heavy. We are only indie by choice. We're only indie because we don't have a choice. Rather, there are no major companies for tabletop. There are only a few for video games. To go indie is the only way to get any of your stuff out there. So if we wanted to write for a lot of us do actually want to write for D&D. That's why you will see a lot of creators in the DMs Guild, because that's the only venue. We also have one creator. I think Rachel might have seen this person around and might know them more than me. Dion Fernandez. Is it Dion Fernandez? Is that his last name? He's been doing World of Darkness scenarios forever. And all
Yeah.
of his stuff is in the storyteller's vault. Like, he's been designing for longer than some of us. And if you guys were blown away by BJ, I think he started trying to do a full D&D Filipino game. I'm not sure what direction he's going to take it in anymore, but that was his project for years. And I think even Rachel and the rest even got to play test it, and I heard some pretty wild stuff. So yeah, we're indie because there is no other venue.
Ian
So
will be at
that's
session 0, actually.
oh really? Okay.
Like I've never met him. This is like
Same.
the first instance of me talking to him, right? But it's like finding that mythical creature.
see, it's gonna be me like at session 0, just taking notes and be like, okay, spreadsheet. Who do we have to have on the show? Who do we have?
I think the reason why we didn't interact with him before is because he's not in Manila.
Yeah,
He's
Yeah.
up in the north, like 8 hours away north.
8 hours
Or
away.
6 hours now, right? Because of the new roads.
Yeah.
Something like that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I only talk to him via email too. Like, he's not in the Discord, he's not on Twitter, he's not anywhere but,
Oh, wow.
but email and like Facebook.
He's literally a mythical creature.
Yeah.
So
It's crazy that
Yeah.
like not having Discord or not having Twitter just makes you this ghost, this like elusive creature out there in the wild. You know what? It's just learning about like the Southeast Asian like RPG scene for me was very similar to when I first encountered someone from the Chinese TTRPG scene, like in China.
I can imagine.
And like I was and you know what? Honestly, it was the exact same experience as meeting you folks at Big Bad, because you literally like, look, I have all these games, right? And you pulled them out. I was literally at Gen Con 2018, and I ran into another Canadian designer, Jason Pitt. And I ran into him. He's like, "Oh, yo, Daniel, I want you to meet my friend," and I forget his name. And it was this Chinese guy, and he had a suitcase.
Oh.
And he had a suitcase, but it was like a rolling suitcase. It was like a suitcase. And
Oh my god.
and I was like, okay. And Jason's like, "Oh, you gotta show Daniel what you showed me." And I'm like, "This is like a drug deal or something. What's going on?" I'm like looking around, and there's so many people at this con. I'm like, what is happening? And he opens it up, and it's like, and I see the Fate core rulebook, but
Ah.
in Chinese.
Oh.
And his suitcase was full of official translations of Chinese like TTRPGs and board games. And I was like, what? He's like, yeah, I work for this publisher. We're the only ones who do it. Like, we do these localized translations. And I was like, okay, so like I gotta ask, like, what's the most popular TTRPG in China? And he was like, Fate. And I was like, oh.
Interesting.
And
That
I
is
was trying to
super
wrap my head
interesting.
around it, and I was like, oh, what is that? I'm like, why Fate? And he's just like, it's what appeals to the like local sensibilities. And I was like, okay, what's the second most popular one? And I was like, okay, if it's Fate, maybe they're like really simple narrative driven systems. I was thinking like maybe it'll be like PBTA, and that'd be really cool. And he's like, Pathfinder. And I was like, what? I was like, it's like Fate and then Pathfinder. And I was like, and he's like, yeah, then there are like small hobby groups that like 5th edition. 5th edition is like not that popular over there as of 2018, and this one person who works in that space. But I was so blown away by like, you know, we always think about how international D&D is, but D&D really isn't super international. And like that experience really like made me think like, yeah, you know, I want to learn more about the TTRPG scene in like different Asian countries. And I know like in Japan there are local TTRPG games there that are like made by Japanese creators that are very different from the ones here. Like I want to learn these ones. And then like Agatha, you and I interviewed Sangjun Park, who made Moonflower, and like the Korean scene, and how different the Korean scene is. And I'm just like, we need to do more of these.
Yes, and according to him, what is biggest there is D&D.
Yeah,
which is also interesting.
Philippines is definitely D&D. Like we are so D&D, it hurts. Like like I could talk about stuff. I'm not gonna do that, so I'm gonna save it for the Discord or like another episode.
So Rachel, you just really?
Yeah.
So in Japan, because we used to go regularly before the pandemic, right? We go there for Christmas and New Year because we have a hard time doing the holidays here. I guess it's so much demand for your time and traffic and everything, right? So we always go to the hobby spaces there, and it's just shelves of like Call of Cthulhu translations and everything. But they also do their own stuff. And then I have seen D&D translations there, and they have so many accessories for gaming. Right.
Wow.
So I'm like,
And I know that like in Japan, Games Workshop is trying to kind of get Warhammer big in Japan, and it's the only Asian country that has an official Games Workshop store.
Singapore also has it, and I think Hong Kong.
Oh, that's sick.
But we have been to the Warhammer store in Japan, and it's like 2 floors. Like their buildings are small, so it's a small strip of a building with 2 floors for Warhammer. And then they have like the painting corner, then they have a shelf of stuff to sell and everything. So we did spend some time there because Eric was looking for stuff to bring home, right, for painting and everything. And it was really interesting because, you know, people would come in and then they'd just be like, hey, I'm here for like the afternoon, and they'll sit down and they'll start painting. And I'm like, it's pretty robust, the community there.
Yeah, and I read an article about how Games Workshop is trying to kind of bring Warhammer to Asia, and how they have to very much think about their lore and how the lore translates to, you know, the different cultural expectations, and how to take these very odd names that are inspired by like, you know, like the Roman world and the Latin language, and bring that over to Asian languages. And I think it's super interesting. I've always had this idea that it's for like the travel show that would be least watched, and it's travel around to different Asian countries and meet up with TTRPG and board game designers, talk about their local sensibilities, their games, and then eat food. Mostly an excuse to travel and eat food.
Just call up Netflix. They do that crap all the time.
Yeah, and hey, Netflix, yo Netflix, I know there's a pandemic going on, but I really want to travel around the world and play games with people and eat food.
You can call yourself like the board game ranger or something.
The board game ranger.
Ooh.
Because there's a food ranger guy, right?
Yeah, and then you just come up with some kind of catchphrase. Hey everyone,
but
it's Friday.
Hey everyone, it's Friday.
Oh my god.
You can make it part of your show where you try to like play the game with them despite language barriers and stuff.
That'd be cool, actually.
Yeah.
That'd be really neat. Well, that's also something we could do on Asians Represent. Now, I had a question, and this kind of relates to kind of where I want to steer the tail end of the conversation to. And it's, you know, over here in North America, when people talk about Call of Cthulhu, like, immediately people are like, fuck Lovecraft and all of that, right? Because Lovecraft was, like an objectively racist person. He was racist. There's no denying that. He was very overt with his racism, and his other prejudices, right? So I often wonder, like, when you say that like Call of Cthulhu is really popular in Japan, like a part of me, the first question was why, and I not from like it shouldn't be popular, but I wonder like what the Japanese audience gravitates towards. And like that's where I kind of want to steer our conversation, because I know Pam and like Mahar, we've also talked about this, and it's like, look, some people get really upset about certain things and think that all Asian people should be upset by it. When others say, hey, no, this is a part of my experience, or hey, you know what, I don't find that offensive. Like when I'm looking at my DMs on Twitter, I would say like my DMs can be categorized as such. One, a select group of people who I message about Warhammer and we just share our projects. What, Steve? What?
I'm happy for your joy.
I enjoy it. We message about our painting. Two, it's like people who I think are dope. And three, it's like people who reach out to me and ask me, hey, is this racist? And I get that a lot. And we've talked about this before, the idea of, Asians represent, and by extension, like Pam and like Steve, I know this happens to the three of us a lot, and us getting tagged into conversations and being weaponized against people's projects and work. When people make this assumption that we are all going to react the same way, we're all going to react with like what they assume to be like disapproval over something. And I kind of want to bring this to a broader conversation of the fact that like Asian sensibilities are not a monolith. We don't all think the same. And I'm pretty sure that all six of us who are in this conversation right now can quickly find something in TTRPGs or in pop culture or media or something that we've said on Asians Represent that we don't all agree with. And I think it's important that we talk about that. And kind of stress that conversations that are to be had about TTRPG media, because that's primarily what we do, we need to have lots of voices, need to have lots of perspectives considered. So, I wonder what you folks think about that. I know people are talking about cargo shorts in the chat, and cargo shorts are universally great. So that is exempt from this conversation.
Oh, can I unmute the host? No, I can't.
You can't. That's why I'm the host. Power.
Anyways.
I do have a kind of a spicy question.
Spice it up.
Well, I mean, okay. Not sure what's the best way to word this, but I do want to ask, like, what do you think are the differences between North American game design, or like just North American approach to Asianness versus, specifically diaspora versus native?
Yeah.
Because diaspora, this is something I realized that it's not really brought up, and I do feel that there is not really a divide, but there's a very distinct unspoken separation between the way diasporic Asian designers approach games and how RPGSA, for example, approaches game design. Like I vibe with what Joaquin does a lot. I vibe with a lot of what the RPGSA designs work on a lot, but when it comes to like looking to what other diasporic Asian creators are making, I'm like, it feels different. I'm not sure what it is. I've talked to like, I think Kazumi Chin about this. We can't identify what it is. So I'm always asking this, like, what is that one thing not that one thing, but what is the difference? You know what I mean? Because like, it's just, I want to say that it bothers me to the point where I'm like, it's there, but I don't understand it. So what are your thoughts on that?
I think that's not spicy. I think it's quite
I don't
savory.
think that's spicy at all.
That's like quite. I like that question a lot.
No, Asian savory is spicy to other people.
Oh.
I think I can go first, and I can speak to kind of like the diaspora, like the North American experience and my experience with tabletop RPGs. I don't really consider myself a game designer per se. Like I've written and edited.
You're
and
a
done that kind of
best-selling
stuff.
author, Steve.
Yeah, yeah.
Don't underplay your achievements.
But I think a lot of kind of the media and games that I really enjoy, they all kind of try to center around, or at least have in the highlight, Asian stereotypes, so that we can subvert them and deconstruct them. And that comes from a past trauma from the diaspora. So a lot of the games I really resonate with are games about, fortune cookies or rice or chopsticks, and like those things are like highlighted, and then the game really knocks it out of the park for me. Like they say that, and I like an eyebrow raises, like what are you going to do with that? And then if they are able to through a nuanced kind of way deconstruct it, or to flip the stereotype or something like that, then it's gold standard for me. That's what I really want to play with. But in my very limited conversations with the folks who are more native to the countries overseas and what have you, it's kind of like shmeh. It's like I get why that would be interesting, but it doesn't resonate to the same degree. And that's been kind of my anecdotal experience.
Yeah.
So I don't know if anyone else shares or has something different.
I think a good I think a specific example would be Jiangxi Blend Banquet Hall, because I do think that was quite popular among diasporic circles, but I think in native, like, and I'm not sure whether this is like true for like RPGSA, like in general, but I feel like we just kind of ignored it, or we just didn't read. We saw it and we were just like, yeah, this is a cool game, but we're not gonna be like, this is not for us. So I feel that's what happened.
Well, if I might gently push back, I mean, wasn't I just at least talking about how we shouldn't actually look for the one thing or even the characterization in general, because that's literally impossible. And I think that should be the first step towards deprogramming and understanding each other better. If you want to deconstruct the monolith, you must first consider the monoliths in your own thoughts. Because, for example, Jiangxi might actually relate a lot to some of the Filipinos who came there, because one interesting thing about our diaspora communities here is that we have a thing with blending, because it's something I've noticed in my own sample size of a lot of Filipino families who are neither here nor there. Because of many things in our context, we are stuck in a perpetual state of diaspora. We are even migratory to each other. 9 out of the 10 Filipinos you will talk to from here will tell you that they have at least one relative, at most twice removed from them, who is abroad. 1 to 3, maybe 5, or an entire family. My own family is halfway between Toronto and Manila. So I understand the question and the concern, I guess, about finding a difference between diasporic games and local games. But I think that before we answer those questions, it's more important, and this is in general, to understand monoliths, to talk about context. And that's how you can understand why some people are offended by certain things or uncomfortable, whereas other people might not be, because your context is entirely important. I've been reflecting a lot, and for example, on what Daniel said about Call of Cthulhu being popular with Japan. It may be because of the focus on cosmic horror and the emotional drives and some of the beats that relate a lot to what they talk about in their narratives. Of course, any expert on this matter can completely blow me out of the water, because my expertise only goes up to MA and I am not Japanese, right? So again, context, right? Like, in assuming that there are ways that we can talk about it universally, we are also kind of hurting ourselves and possibly inadvertently harming somebody by saying that there is a one thing. We can only resonate on some levels, respect those resonances, and then move on. That's the best that we can do. And terminology should only be there as some kind of theoretical baseline by which we can start a conversation, because that is as far as we go.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I would agree with you, Pam. I mean, like, Sam, that's like a really good. I mean, it's an interesting, thought-provoking question. I mean,
I do want to add to this, though.
Yeah, go for it.
I feel like I kind of understand. I love the nuances that we are bringing to this conversation. I also understand what you mean, Sam, because I think there is a difference in terms of where you feel centered, or no, not where you feel positioned, like positionality in a society that bleeds into everything that you create. So especially things that are about creating experiences or mimicking experiences like role-playing games, right? So, and going back to Jiangshi, and how that game is very much about being a marginalized person, being a part of a marginalized community. And I think, and this is I think this is what Steve's answer was like, which is that like a lot of times when you are a part of the diaspora, you occupy a position of being marginalized. And again, this is grossly generalizing, but I'm just saying, like, especially as a POC in the West, like that is the place that you kind of come from. And it's, yeah, it is oftentimes exploring and engaging with these expectations and stereotypes that may or may not have been placed on you, or people like you, the people associate with you. So that's a lot of the engagement, I think. And there's no way, at least for me, to think about these things without that context. Like I have to engage with these themes through that lens, through quote unquote the white gaze, because that is the gaze that a part of my identity is formed through. But then at the same time, and now this is where I am not speaking as, you know, a person living through that experience, but I wonder if, like, when you are not a part of a diasporic group, or if you're, but also I don't know what that means, because like even in Asia, there's the history of so many people going to different places. Like there are diasporas, like what Pam said about we go to different, migrating to different communities, or we're migrating to each other. But I wonder if sometimes you feel more like you're writing from the center of whatever society that you're living in. And at least this is when I think about my Taiwanese relatives specifically, when they talk about world news, for example, when they talk about like the way that people of color are treated in, say, Canada, just as an example, this is for them like an outside thing, right? And then so that when they talk about these experiences, when they hear people talk about that's outside of the peripheral of their lived experience. And so I think that is a huge part of the difference in perspectives. Like you can engage with this from a much more emotionally removed point, depending on the situation, of course, and your history. But that is my take on the difference between designers that are part of the diaspora and designers, or specifically diaspora in the West, and then the designers that are part of the communities not in the West. Is this where the positionality of your identity comes from?
Yeah, I'm chewing this term, like positionality, and like where your position is, because position for me is both a place and a time.
Yep.
So Agatha, right now in Toronto, for folks that look like us, this particular time, the marginalization actually comes out in quite toxic ways. And I'm not sure if you've experienced anything in your time in public in Toronto, but it can get pretty bad.
Oh, I have, right now.
Yeah. But that is an experience that is both is a positional experience, because it is in Toronto in 2021.
Mm-hmm.
So that I'm chewing on that. That's some tasty thoughts.
Yes,
Yeah,
and
like,
Ting said in the chat, thank you for giving me the word that was in the back of my mind, but I couldn't think. It's when you're part of a dominant culture. I think that like being in the margin or being the part of the dominant culture ish, like, but of course there are things to unpack there as well, like again depending on your background and history in wherever you're living. But yes, I think that's what it is.
Yeah, I wish actually that Mahar could have been around for today, because like he put it so eloquently when he was describing his own experiences. Like me and Rachel, for example, at present, because of our particular context in this space time, we count as like relatively privileged to privileged among other Filipinos. Like we're in like the maybe 10% when it comes to like how we are doing in terms of, are the lights on? Do we have to worry about bills? Are we considering our next paycheck, et cetera, et cetera? So like we are actually our dominant culture, but since we are exposed to other sides, we are actually on the margins of your position. See, so
Absolutely.
like the power dynamics, and I'm just gonna keep doing this whenever we talk about it on streams. Power dynamics are rarely discussed in a productive way by anyone, because it's natural. It's a natural human reaction to be like, but like I feel about this. Like, why is your perspective like that? Or like,
or to make
right?
broad sweeping generalizations in favor of one side or another.
Yeah, like I don't even in discursive theory, which as like I'm gonna put my old teacher hat on right now. Discursive theory when it comes to race, ethnicity, identity, none of those should universally apply. And yet in our individual journeys of trying to find answers that settle our hearts, we often make the mistake of actually appropriating some of those theories that don't work for us, right? But also, I say mistake only because I don't have the word for it right now. It's just part of the process. I, for example, have a lot of angst, or rather, a lot of concerns about how it's going to be for me when I move abroad. Because my father, for example, he's 70 plus, and he's always been big on like, we went abroad to give you a chance. You know, you have the passport, you'll be fine. And I remember looking him in the eye and going, Dad, my passport isn't going to change my face. And it's not going to change my skin. And it's not going to change my accent. For white people, and even for a lot of my diasporic associates, I'm not going to be one of them. I'm going to be my own identity. And that's going to hurt. And that's going to be stressful. When I go to Manila, I'm surrounded by other brown people. We will pick on each other for other harmful aspects, but not about race. But when I go there, I'm going to add the extra tension of being different and having an entirely different perspective from them that I'm going to have to navigate on my own, because most people will not do me the favor of meeting me halfway. So it's a lot.
Yeah, I mean that's how I felt when I worked in China, right?
Oh yeah.
Right. Like at first glance, I look like everyone there, for the most part. I look like everyone there when I was in Shanghai, but then like, you know, when you hear me talk, when you see the clothes that I wear, when you see my tattoos, or like the nail polish on my toes, right? I stand out, and I feel different, right? The ways in which people approach work, I think, is another thing to really consider when we're talking about TTRPG styles, because, you know, when we talk about the ability to create in TTRPGs, many of us don't have the luxury of doing that full time, right? And doing TTRPGs full time is for some like a goal. For others who are happy to do it, you know, part time, you know, they continue to do that. But our ability to even do TTRPG work is also a privilege in many cases, and I think that's important to acknowledge. Because, you know, I'm happy that I have a job that I work 9 to 5, and that when I end my day, I can do TTRPG stuff. I'm grateful for that, right? That's one thing to consider.
Even this show that we produce right now, that is a privilege not every single creator gets. We happen to have stable internet connections. I have a freaking ring light like pointing at me and a Yeti microphone.
Yeah,
like that is a luxury that not every single creator has.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes it's easy to forget that we come from this, and we try to do good, and our hearts are absolutely in the right place. But we also speak from a position of privilege, even within our country and communities over here. In the
Yeah,
West.
and there are, you know, to be Asian is just something that's very difficult to decipher, because that word, that identity is at the intersection of so many different things, right? Our nationalities, our cultures, our language, our physical appearance. There are so many things at play here. And I kind of go back to Sam's sort of question, to kind of bring it back there, you know, it's difficult to say whether or not there is an Asian diasporic style of game design, because even one's style is based on, you know, our positioning, right? I might be, you know, if you look at Agatha, Steve, and myself, right? And we look at, if we play games together, and we each have 3 distinct styles, right? What?
We do. We
We
absolutely
have
do.
3 distinct styles, right? Yet we're all in North America and we're all in Toronto. But our backgrounds, right, are all different. How we got to Toronto are all different, right? Like when we play games, Agatha likes to ask these hard questions. Agatha likes, you know, you like the narrative storytelling games, right? I like games with a lot of like violence, and I prefer like really rich description, right? And then Steve, you're kind of like in the middle between the two. You like that drama, you like that tension, but you also like that sort of traditional D&D style as well, right? So to say that there is a sort of diasporic style of game design is something that's really hard to do, because people of the Asian diaspora all have their own individual tastes and are all molded by their experiences with Asian people, with non-Asian people, and the cities that they live in and the games that they have access to. So, I mean, it's a really thought-provoking question, and I'm going to assume that's what you intended on us talking about, because it's so complicated. Now,
Yeah, it's complicated.
it's super complicated, right? And one of the things, Pam, you said this is a process, right? And you know, a part of this process is finding solutions, right? And there is this tension in the TTRPG space. That tension is that, like, you know, people think all Asians are the same. People think that all Asians react to the same things. People think that because you are Asian, you are able to do this thing. People think that
The math, right?
people think that, like, you know, all Asians kind of sit in a position of privilege as designers, and in many cases, you know, that's true, but there is so much nuance. So my question to all of you is, how do we reach that nuance, and how do we get other people to understand it, right? As we try to work towards a conclusion, right? An end point. Now, what is this end point? It's nebulous. We don't know, right? In a perfect world, right, we are all creating, you know, respectful and diverse content that is reflective of our unique experiences. And the works that we create are being accepted by our peers, our loved ones. But how do we get to that point? How do we get to that point of understanding? How do we do that? And so that's the question that I pose to you. Now, if you don't have an answer now, that's okay, because I want, and Steve's already like, I don't know. But if you don't have, Steve, give me that face. I've streamed with you enough, Steve. But
I have an answer, but you're not gonna like it.
No, I'm gonna like any answer, because an answer means that we have more content. So what I was gonna say is, like, if you don't have an answer, like, and you're on this stream, or if you're thinking about this in the chat, like, this conversation is supposed to continue. It doesn't end with this Twitch stream. It doesn't end with this YouTube video if you're watching it, right? It continues on to our public spaces like Twitter, or our private spaces like our Discord server. So, Steve, since you said you have an answer that I might not like, what is your answer? How do we put ourselves, or move ourselves, or position ourselves closer to a more nuanced conversation about games online?
So part of the question that I wanted to focus on for a little bit is the idea of like an endpoint and how it's nebulous.
Mm-hmm.
I don't even like that description of it. I think the endpoint is unknowable, not even nebulous. It is strictly, you cannot know what it is. And the reason to say that is because we as human beings who are in a position, I'm gonna start using that more, who are in a position of space and time, we can only make very discrete moves in the spaces that we have. So we are going to go through evolutionary steps here. We are going to make small changes here and there, and it's all going to be incremental. And it's going to happen en masse, and it's going to happen in a lot of, you know, 2 steps forward, 1 step back kind of situations. And it's going to be painful and it's going to be rough.
So perhaps to clarify then, how can we either take control or attempt to steer this? Just like if we're going to kind of work off of sort of that biological concept of evolution, evolution doesn't have an endpoint, and evolution is more of a process. So then perhaps the question should be, how do we take control of this process?
So I think for this process, what helped me primarily, and I know this is like a meme at this time, was I had to really resonate and engage and deconstruct my own thoughts by checking my own privilege, which I, as a person of color, I'm like, what do you mean I got to check my privilege? Like, I'm a person of color, but, you know, reading through like texts about checking your own privilege and what that means was very enlightening for me and deconstructed enough of my boundaries, not all of them, but because it's a work in progress, but allowed me to better interact and engage with not only other like game designers, but just other people in general. And we've already talked about some of the privileges here that, you know, we benefit from that some people of color, don't realize. I mean, I can wake up in the morning and I have an able body. Like I can wake up in the morning and not worry about chronic pain or illness. I don't have any dependents. I'm not worrying about using some of my hard-earned dollars to take care of other people. And these are all privileges that allow me to interact and engage in the community in a very specific way. And that is a valid way to approach situations, but not the only way. And for me to apply the same morals and ethics and lens that I have spent my entire life building up and then apply to someone else is not only unfair, but it can also do a lot of harm. So as much of a meme as it is, the number one thing I think people can do is check their privilege.
So perhaps to put it in, I guess, terms that, I don't know, I think that I understand. I think one of the things that we need to do is when we are approaching games and we are approaching game design, one of the things we need to do is take a more culturally relative approach to that. And it's viewing a work, whether it be a piece of media like a podcast, an actual play, a work of art, or a work of literature, and we view it, when we attempt to view it, through the lens of the creator's culture and their circumstances and their position, if we're going to use that word, right? Rather than from almost like an ethnocentric one, judging it based on the merits and we could say the ideals of our own cultures, right? And while, you know, we practice that in real life where we should be practicing that in real life, where we aren't judging other people's cultures, like, I think one of the most common North American one is like, if I say, oh, did people ever say you were eating worms for lunch?
What?
Right? See, so see right there. That's a perfect example of this, right? So for like a very common experience in the North American Asian diaspora is being teased that your noodles are worms.
Oh, okay.
Right?
The one I get asked is if I ate cat before.
Yep, I've heard cat.
Because in the Philippines, I am actually like mixed race also. Because my mother's side came from China and everything. Right? So there are a lot of Chinese Filipinos in the country, and I'm one of them. But some of the stereotypes that get passed on to like there are a lot of stereotypes about the Chinese, and then there are a lot of stereotypes about the Chinese Filipinos. I used to get it a lot, and so on. But I never really was bothered by it from the Filipino side. I was more bothered by it from the Chinese side. Like, you get so is that?
Yeah.
But to answer your question, well, not really answer, but I would posit that I think we could never really understand each other's nuance like 100%, like, or even like 80% or anything, right? So what we should strive for is to be able to respect that difference, and then to be able to work like despite the difference with each other. So
Yeah.
that would be like a nice thing to strive for, the understanding and the respect of being able to um like work with each other despite differences and all of that, as long as the differences aren't harmful to each other and so on.
Yeah,
Like if
exactly.
you're, yeah,
I,
exactly.
I think you made a really good point there. So as long as what we're doing isn't harming others,
Yeah,
we need to have conversation. I think in many ways we are too quick to, I would say, judge the work of people,
yeah,
right? And so what I was trying to say earlier is, how we take a more culturally relative approach to like learning other people's cultures, being like, hey, what is this food that you're eating? I'd like to know more about it. Or, taking time to learn about somebody's life and culture. I think we should try to take that into how we interact with other people's games. Can you, when we're at a con, when we're at Session Zero Con and you're visiting a vendor and you're talking to the vendor or something, or you're sitting in the lobby or you're in a game room. Oh, God, I just can't wait for everyone to do Session Zero Con because it's so dope, right? I can't wait to hear conversations or participate in conversations about games and why we like them and the different reasons why we like them. And I think that's just so important. So I feel like, and correct me if I'm wrong, I feel like we've kind of reached a really nice natural stopping point.
I have like one last thing
Do it.
that
Do it
might
up.
help us
Do it up.
also, right? Well, like one last thing or things. This is coming from a community perspective, but I find it very valuable to apply to all when it comes to dealing with differences, nuance. If you say that you're going to try to help anybody with creating a space, you must remember that in creating the space, you cannot be selective about who enters and who stays and who leaves. So you create a space for everyone, even people you do not like. The point was to create the space, to make it happen, to make the conversation start. Wrestling with that again is a process, but keeping it in mind, like front of mind, for me is very important. I'll be a bit bitchy right now and say that there are a lot of people in the Philippine scene alone that I do not like at all, ever. But is that going to stop me from promoting them? No. In fact, there are times when I look at projects and I go, okay, this person I don't like, they'd actually be a great fit, so I'm going to pass the reference to the project to that person, because the point was to give them the platform. It doesn't matter whether I like them or not. What matters is that they get the platform, they do what they will with it. Now, if they become criminal, that's when I will step in and be like, hey, what the fuck, right? But like, liking and dislike is very important from that person is harmful, problematic, bad, right?
yeah,
Absolutely.
Right. And most people dwell on making the dislike somehow equal harmful, problematic, bad. But that's like two totally
They're
different
separate
things.
things. Yeah.
Yeah. And then like in terms of also starting the process, always ask who the person is versus who you are in terms of the creator. Where do they come from versus where you're from? What are the things that seem to inform their perspective versus what informs yours? Creating this whole dichotomy of their work versus what you know, them as people versus you, and then trying to see commonalities and differences will help a lot. And then just listening to them will reveal so much. It's kind of like how you could watch TV shows from another culture and you absorb a lot of things, and later you can kind of think to yourself, is this what it's like over there? I don't know, so let's try and actually ask people about it. Like always ask. Do not stop asking. Do not be comfortable with one answer. There is no one answer. There will never be one answer. So settling in our hearts now that you will not find the answer is huge. And also be honest with your feelings. If you're pissed off, admit to it. That's actually another thing that I've noticed about a lot of us BIPOC. We tend to go like, I'm angry because it's wrong. But there is actually a difference between angry because you just don't like it as a person and angry because it's really wrong. So if you're more honest with your feelings, it'll help a lot. So those are my like quick three of like, okay, there's our last point. Here you go. So
No, I completely, I think that's wonderful. That's, kind of what I wanted to lead into. And it's the importance of community and having a space to converse, right? It's and having a space to kind of connect. Especially now in 2021 and as an extension of 2020, because it still feels like we're in 2020 because it's just like been one long awful year.
Yeah,
right?
2020 New Game Plus.
Yeah, 2020 New Game Plus, everything's harder, even with all of your abilities. Um, Times are tough, and connecting with others is really difficult. And we talked about how we miss cons and how we're really excited about session 0, and those are all genuine feelings. But I think at the root of it all, one of the things we miss most is like being in the same space as people we care about and having a genuine person-to-person connection. I think that's one thing that we miss. And I know that, times are really tough right now. And, we kind of act on these emotions. We feel disconnected. We have anger inside us. We have, resentment inside us. We have frustration built up inside of us. And we need to make sure that, we have places where we can constructively deal with those. And, I'm so happy that Session 0 is, a place where that can occur. I'm so happy that our Discord is a place where that can occur. And for those of you who are watching us live or watching us on YouTube, I hope that you have a space like that. And if you don't, reach out to us. Every stream we always share the Discord link to our server. Because I understand that, asking for help is really difficult. And not everyone is privileged to have a safe space where, they can talk, share their feelings, have, a respectful conversation where you might have opposing viewpoints, right? And I think everyone needs to experience that. I'll be a little bit upfront. This stream has been difficult for me. I really wanted to be a part of it, because I planned it and I didn't give Agatha and Steve a structure. But today was difficult for me. One of my former students who I taught for 4 years, I actually taught him how to play Dungeons and Dragons. He passed away, and he took his own life, and he was 16 years old. And that's tough. And he was one of the brightest lights of my class. I have very fond memories of him. I stayed in touch with his family, since I left the museum. And I started thinking during this stream how, if somebody so positive with such a bright future, if something like that could happen to them, a part of me was like, I wish that I could have been there to talk to him as his teacher. So, if things are tough for you folks who are, watching the stream or watching the VOD on YouTube, or if you're listening to this conversation while you're working out at home or driving to and from work, if you're feeling disconnected from your community, be it frustration you have over games or frustration you have over your current situations, please reach out to someone. Because a lot of the stuff that we, kind of feel in our hearts, a lot of the resentment that we have is really not as bad as we think it is. If we feel bitter about a game, if we feel upset about a conversation that I had with another person, if you feel comfortable, reach out to them, connect with them in a more empathetic way, because you never know what another person is feeling or, what their circumstances are. So yeah, I'm happy that we have a community that is a space where I can do that. right? I'm happy that we had a chat where I'd be like, hey fam, like I had a really rough day and I will probably have a really rough weekend. But I know that I can, throw that in there without fear of judgment. And I know that I'll get some support, even if it's like an emoji or like a, yo, Daniel, do you want to run the stream? Right? Or like, hey, Daniel, if you want to play video games tonight, take your mind off of it. Let's just play video games. Right? Like, if you don't have that kind of community, like reach out and we're more than happy to welcome you to ours. Because like our Discord server, one of the reasons why 2020 felt like a very good year to me, because I got to connect with so many people and I learned so much about their cultures, their, game sensibilities, the types of games that they want to make, their hopes and dreams. And I think that's what is kind of moving us along this process that we were talking about, Steve. That process of having more empathy and understanding and respect in the tabletop gaming industry. And I think that comes from us becoming better, more understanding and more empathetic humans. So for all of you who are out there watching, if you're parents, hug your kids, spend time with them. And, if you know somebody who might feel isolated because maybe they're self-quarantining or they're having a hard time with their family, like reach out to them. If you don't know what to say, make an offer. Be like, hey, I'm playing games right now. If you want to join, join. And you don't even have to talk about that tough shit. Sometimes just being in the same space with someone is more than enough. Yeah.
That's really, really beautiful. And what I think that's a great place to end tonight's stream. I'm gonna go round table real quick. Pam, I'm gonna start with you, then Rachel, then Sam. If you can just remind us who you are, where people can find you, what you may be working on, anything you want to plug. Now is a great time, and we'll close off a little early here. So Pam, why don't you start us off? Who are you? Where can people find you? What are you working on?
Okay, I'm Pam Punsalan, also known as the Dovetailer. I am on Patreon as the Dovetailer and Twitter and on Itch. I am currently working on with Sam and also my partner Sin and Joaquin under Sandy Pug Games. We're going to do a Kickstarter called Our Shores. We're talking a lot about community. One of my love notes to all of you is that if you need a community, join us. But also, I highly encourage you to make your own. It is good to have multiple spaces. It is good to be with other people. We will do what we can at Asians Represent to make you feel welcome and to give you what you need. But there are, of course, rules of engagement, and there are also times when we will not be able to fulfill what you're looking for. And that is only human. So if you want to strike out on your own, by all means, do so. We are here for you, but also be there for yourselves and be there for each other. So that's me.
I love that. Pam, we always love having you on the stream. Your thoughts are always just chef kissing hand motion, just like every single time.
Pam is the reason why our Discord server even exists. So
it's very true.
Let's make sure everyone knows that.
as much as you hate that community word, I truly see you as a leader in the spaces that we share, and I really look up to you in the work that you do. That said, Rachel, who are you and where can people find you and what are you working on?
So I am Rachel Teng again from Manila, and I have a Twitter account that I'm not, because I'm not a game designer, so of course I don't really talk about things that people would normally be interested in. But I do RPG events organization, so hobby related events. I do that. I've been doing it for like 15, 20 years now. And so you can find me there on Twitter. What I would like to plug is Session Zero online, which is happening on January 30. So for our time, it will be noon. So for Canada, it will be about 11 p.m. your time, right? So this time, it starts on our time. So everyone can come. It's free. Our sponsors have made it possible to be free because we are super, we are committed to making these designers and this event accessible, right? So we come from Asia and not a lot of people can afford an event ticket. So it's free. And thank you to the sponsors and to everyone who helped with that one. You can find more information about our event at sessionzerocon.com. And then, so I'll see you there on January 30 because the three of you have a panel.
Oh my god.
Oh wait, we have a panel.
Oh
Shit.
my god.
So you can see Daniel and Steve and Agatha there talking about Asians Represents at I think 11 p.m. your time.
Yeah, Agatha's going to do a whole panel on how to be a streamer. Can't wait.
Damn. This is a freaking callback.
I love it. Full circle here.
Full circle.
But moving on here, Sam, really quickly, who are you? Where can people find you? What are you working on?
Hi, I am Sam. I'm just a local Malaysian game designer. You can find me on Twitter and itch.io under Babblegum Sam. You can, please, if you're interested in sort of like very half wholesome, half spicy things, come follow me on Twitter because like I am working on Capital Lights and like I feel like the game itself is quite loaded. So if you do kickstart the book, if you do kickstart our Shores, you will find like I am investing and I am putting a lot of effort into writing and creating resources for the game itself because it's a very Asian game, talks about identity, talks about class, and like do follow my Twitter for like my thoughts on that. Do support the Kickstarter, not just to support me, or not just to support like RPGC, but do support it because there's a lot of good shit.
It's
a lot of
real
good
good
shit.
shit.
Yeah, man.
You have been posting screenshots and like teasers of Capital Lights, and like I am so intrigued by this game. I still don't fully understand what this game is, and I think it's on purpose, but like I want to play it and I don't know why. But like it's hitting me somewhere in the brain. It's hitting me.
It's up there.
I feel like the game, if I had to describe it, it would just be a one-for-one adaptation of real life as an urban Asian person. I would like to. Sorry.
Yeah? Go ahead.
No, I would like to say that I very quickly that like it focuses on two things: class and gender. In terms of like we talked about racial positioning, all that sort of stuff. Like, I do agree. There is not one way we can understand it. I don't think that there is a proper conclusion to these things. Capitalize is my way of going like, okay, what if we just took a very hard look at the two most oppressive things about Asians that are universal, no matter where you are, and there is class and there is gender. I don't want to take up too much time to talk about this. It's very loaded. I will rant a fuck ton about it. But,
well, I think.
But you know what you should do if people want to know, they got to kickstart our Shores.
Yeah. Go ahead. Yeah. Absolutely. Like I said, that we have a lot of like unknowns coming in, like with like fresh ideas from like Indonesia, Malaysia. Like, I feel like. Don't just follow the popular Asians, don't follow the trendy Asians on Twitter. There are a lot of trendy Asian game designers. They're good.
Who's a trendy Asian game designer?
I'm not gonna say. You know,
Me.
I mean, like
Me, I'm trendy. Follow me.
Pam's
Don't
trendy.
listen to Sam. Follow me. I'm trendy. Need the money.
Yo, I'm
Follow me. I want to be
one
trendy.
follower away from 6K.
Whoa.
Someone
nice.
on this panel here was a writer on Amazon's #1 best-selling D&D book. So I mean,
Yeah. Like
You know what?
Don't just. Sorry. Yeah, go ahead.
Maybe I can log into the G&G account and I'll look for you. Daniel Kwan.
Oh my god!
Yeah, I've done it.
nice.
6K!
And I think that's absolute energy that we'll end off on here. Thanks everyone for tuning in. I've been one of your co-hosts, one of three. My name's Steve. Joining me are Agatha and Daniel. You'll catch us every Friday right here on this channel for the wrap up. That's right, it happens on Friday. And you can also catch some of us on the Asians Represent podcast, hosted by the One Shot Network. I'll drop a link here. In addition, I'll drop one more link for the Discord. So we have our Asian Represent community If you really enjoyed this conversation, I highly recommend you join in. Spaces are limited, but currently we're sitting at roughly around 20 more invites or so. So please, if you enjoyed this, join. You can lurk, you can listen, and that is a completely valid way to join in our community. And we now have a brand new spanking opt-in system to channels, so you don't have to mute them all. You can just find the ones that interest you, like game design, opportunities, memes. you can just opt in.
I will say this, and I feel like this is for the sake of being more understanding of everyone's positioning, because we talked about it today. If you're watching this on YouTube because you are in a different time zone and you can't watch this live to get a Discord invite, send us an invite, like a DM on Twitter or anything like that, or an email. All the contact information is in the description of the YouTube video or our Twitch channel, and just let us know. Be like, hey, I can't watch it live. Could I get a Discord invite? And we'll send you one.
Yeah. Makes sense.
Okay. For the sake, we want to be as inclusive as possible with that. But yeah, if you want to get it live, gotta come on Twitch. That said, Steve, thank you for that outro. Did a great job. You just forgot to talk about Asians Represent socials. AZNS Represent on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, and AZNS Rep on Twitch.
Bruh, he wasn't done though.
I'm pretty sure Steve was finishing up. Okay, I guess this is like Steve and I 1-for-1, because Steve was like, Daniel, you didn't say it's Friday.
Oh, I see. I got it.
There we go. We're even. Take care, folks, and have a wonderful day wherever you are. Bye, everyone.
Thank you for having us.
Oh, yeah, you're welcome. Thank you for coming on. You should come on again. Let's do this more.
Please come on again.
Sure.